On this special evening, Duke Matilio's estate is lively and filled with anticipation. There is excitement and anticipation everywhere. For tonight, there will be a ball, an event that leaves no one on the estate indifferent. There is a nostalgia in the air for a time when the Duchess was still among the living, and balls were held much more often, filling the house with joy and laughter. The girls of the manor, dressed in their best clothes, cannot hide their excitement. They whisper among themselves, reminiscing about past balls and dreaming of what is to come. Among them is Viola, who recalls her dance with Duke Matilio with particular trepidation. In her memories, he remains a beautiful man whose charm and attention to her made her the queen of the ball for a moment. However, not everyone shares a common admiration for the Duke. Adette Bears, a girl with a strong and independent character, remains indifferent to Duke Matilio's charms. In the 3 years that had passed since she had first set foot at the ball at his estate, she had never once received a dance invitation from him. This fact only reinforces her indifference to the Duke, tinting her inner independence and uniqueness among the other admiring ladies, especially when her mother mentions it. As the atmosphere of anticipation and joy filled the manor, Adette's mother suddenly reminded her of an urgent matter that was to be settled this year. Adette's fate as a girl of her position was sealed. She was to be married. This reminder struck Adette like a cold shower, causing her to have an immediate and highly emotional reaction. She fainted, leaving everyone present in a state of shock and concern. The ladies gathered around did not hide their excitement about what had happened to Adette. They were genuinely concerned about her well-being, showing their care and sympathy. However, as unexpected as Adette's reaction was, even more unexpected was her subsequent action. Suddenly, she jumped up, starting to cough, which made her realize that her fall was on purpose. Adette's mother and sister apparently decided it would be best if she skipped the ball. They chose to leave Adette behind so she could rest and recover from such a stressful incident and went to the ball without her. Meanwhile, Adette was taken to a room where she was given a chance to rest and gather her strength after the shock she had experienced. As Adette made her way down the corridor to her hiding place, looks of concern and sympathy accompanied her every step. Her servant, filled with anxiety, escorted her to the door of her room. He could not conceal his excitement as he stood at the threshold. His heart was filled with a trembling tenderness for Adette, especially after she had shown concern for him by giving him a hot compress during his illness. This act of kindness had left a deep imprint on his heart, and now, seeing her in such a state, he was deeply troubled. Left alone in her room, Adette quickly stripped off her clothes, which until that moment had seemed almost like a foreign shell to her, and donned her male attire. This decision was more than just a change of clothes. It was an action filled with symbolism and intention. As she changed, Adette discarded not only her dress, but also the expectations placed on her by society and her family. In that moment, she chose freedom, epitomized by the masculine attire that provided her with the opportunity to act outside of the box. When it came time to leave, the servant couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He was worried that Adette might run into his mother or sister, which would inevitably lead to a pile of questions and possibly conflict. However, Adette was determined and ready to face any obstacles in her way. She believed she had a unique chance before her to make a difference for her family, and she couldn't let that chance slip away because of fear or doubt. Adette was confident in her decision. She explained to her servant that the male disguise not only gave her freedom of movement and action, the ability to act incognito, which was their only chance to ensure the well-being of the family. Her words were full of confidence and determination, emphasizing her inner strength and willingness to take risks for a higher purpose. Dressed in a masculine outfit that she found not only comfortable but also emotionally liberating, Adette went to the ball. In a world where souls travel through time, being reborn into new guises, Adette's story is one of the most memorable examples. Having gone through 5 reincarnations, she has accumulated not just the wisdom of the past years, but also the memories that have stayed with her through each life. Each of these lives left its unique imprint on her soul, but the last of them, lived in harsh conditions and ended at the age of 30, seemed to her a real test, almost a curse. However, it would seem that fate has given Adette a chance to correct past mistakes by granting her a new life in the body of a noblewoman. She was encouraged by the thought that her current incarnation would allow her to enjoy all the privileges and luxuries that aristocratic blood brings. But instead of the freedom and carefree attitude she expected, Adette faced new challenges. It was especially hard for her to admit that even a visit to the Duke's palace, a symbol of power and wealth, required overcoming many formalities and expectations. One such ordeal was having to wait an hour to get into the ball, which for Adette was a painful reminder that even with her high status, she was not exempt from the restrictions and conventions imposed by society. When Adette crossed the threshold of the Duke's majestic palace, she felt an unprecedented splendor, comparable only to the imperial palace, which she had only heard about in stories. The grandeur and luxury of the architecture, the ornate halls, and the works of art that filled every corner made her heart race in anticipation of new experiences. Immersed in admiration, Adette decided to stroll through the Duke's garden to enjoy the beauty of nature and the skill of the landscape designers who managed to create a real paradise. The air was filled with the fragrance of blooming plants, and a light breeze brought with it the sweet notes of a summer morning. Suddenly, however, the idyll was broken by strange sounds coming from behind the lush greenery of the bushes. These sounds certainly did not fit the atmosphere of an aristocratic garden, and Adette realized that she had unwittingly witnessed the secret amorous practices that were rumored to be part and parcel of the balls and gatherings of the upper classes. It was on the day of the ball, as she remembered that there were secret corners where lovers could hide away from the eyes of the world to enjoy moments of passion and intimacy. Wanting to avoid any misunderstandings and not wanting to become the subject of gossip and speculation, Adette decided to leave the place discreetly. However, in an effort to get away as quickly as possible and without drawing attention to herself, she suddenly collided with someone, literally crashing into a man's chest. When Adette, trying to recover from the unexpected encounter, slowly looked up, she found a face painted with features of nobility and irresistible beauty. The man in front of her mistakenly addressed her as Viscount Terusaf, mistaking her disguise for the true one. This misunderstanding made Adette momentarily numb, for she realized that she had encountered none other than Duke Matilio, the owner of the grand palace and garden in which she had so unexpectedly found herself. Her attempt to retreat turned to failure as she tripped over a rock, miraculously not losing her balance completely. At this critical moment, Duke Matilio, displaying the agility and reflexes of a true gentleman, managed to pick her up, preventing her from falling. Once in his strong and secure arms, Adette felt the color of shame and embarrassment flood her cheeks. In this unexpected physical contact with the Duke, she felt helpless and yet protected. The situation she found herself in was so unexpected and confusing that the words seemed to disappear from her vocabulary, leaving Adette without a way to express all the emotions that were bubbling up inside her. The gaze fixed on the Duke spoke for itself, reflecting excitement and gratitude for his timely intervention, as well as the unspoken curiosity about his person that suddenly flared in her heart. Suddenly, when the situation seemed at its most tense, amplified, obscene sounds came from somewhere far away, abruptly breaking the moment of intimacy between Adette and Duke Matilio. This unexpected sonic burst caused the Duke to reflexively let go of Adette, causing her to be unstoppable on the ground. The fall was as unexpected as the whole ridiculous situation they had gotten into together. Adette's first meeting with the Duke had occurred much earlier, about 3 months earlier, in a more formal and less intimate setting. Adette was then absorbed in her work when news reached her that Duke Matilio had refused to grant her investment. This fact amazed Adette, for according to rumors, the Duke was known for his generosity and openness to new offers, even if they seemed not so promising. However, the answer given by her servant was a real revelation. The Duke supposedly did not accept investment offers from women. This explanation deeply surprised Adette, causing her a mixture of bewilderment and dislike for such discrimination, which seemed so archaic and unfair in the modern world. In a world where tradition and prejudice are deeply rooted in social consciousness, women have often been relegated to a role confined to the walls of the home and the care of the family. Such foundations stated that a lady's true calling was a successful marriage, not the pursuit of self-sufficiency or much less financial independence. Adette, a girl with a strong sense of independence and the will to overcome stereotypes, met such beliefs with open rejection. She was confident that she was capable of succeeding without leaning on her spouse's shoulder, believing that financial well-being and self-actualization were available to anyone who was willing to strive for it. Burdened by these thoughts and frustrated by societal expectations, Adette decided to act. She realized that she had no less determined and enterprising blood in her veins than any man around her. A plan was brewing in her mind that would not only prove her ability to act on her own, but also pave the way to financial independence. With such intentions, she turned to her faithful assistant Morris, entrusting him with a task that could change her fate. Adette offered to send the Duke an investment proposal, but this time she decided to act smarter. Knowing that a direct proposal from a woman could be met with mistrust or even rejected, she resorted to trickery. The proposal was to be sent in the name of her uncle, Viscount Tarasaf, whose name and social position could give the necessary weight and seriousness to her proposal. Viscount Tarasaf's death left a vacuum of power and legacy, for according to the laws of the time, his title could not be passed to a woman, even though Adette's mother was his only daughter. It was a world where gender defined a person's capabilities, and Adette was on the unfair side of it. Had she been born a man, she would have been given the title of Viscountess. But instead, she faced a burdensome reality where her gender became an obstacle to inheritance and power. Adette faced new challenges. Her sister Viola was preparing for marriage, which required a substantial financial outlay for the dowry. It was also necessary to think about her younger sister, Sasha's social debut, which also required a significant investment. The life of a noblewoman, as she now realized, was extremely expensive. These circumstances made Adette think deeply about her situation and the future of her family. An additional blow to her hopes was dealt by the situation with her father, who failed to manage the family business, causing it to go bankrupt. This not only worsened the family's financial situation, but also reduced Adette's chances of securing a decent future for herself and her family. A year ago, when the Duke had announced his ambitious plans for a company dedicated to building huge ships, Adette had caught a glimpse of more than just a commercial venture in that statement. It was the call of the future, a harbinger of new possibilities and horizons that would radically change her own destiny and the well-being of her family. Since then, she has not given up hope of realizing her dream of financial participation in this large-scale project, seeing in it a chance to gain independence and prosperity. Adette, realizing the importance of the moment, decided to act without delay. She took the bold step of using the name of her late uncle, Viscount Tarasaf, to send the Duke a proposal for investment. Her strategy was calculating and graceful, as she counted on her uncle's respected name to pique the Duke's interest and trust. When the Duke received this offer, the name of Tarasaf immediately awakened a familiarity in his mind. This surname could not help but leave a trace in his mind, for in the past it had been connected with high circles and possessed considerable influence. This moment caused the Duke to think seriously about the proposal that had come ostensibly from the Viscount. Thus, the decision to meet the Viscount in person was a logical step, opening the door for future cooperation. The moment Adette held the invitation from the Duke in her hands, she was overcome with despair. The thoughts in her head panikedly searched for a way out of the situation. At first, she even considered sending Morris, her faithful assistant, who had helped her out in business matters more than once, to the Duke. However, the Duke had met Morris before, and his appearance in place of Viscount Tarasaf could only exacerbate the situation, causing bewilderment and perhaps even suspicion. Therefore, realizing the criticality of the moment, Adette decided to make a bold decision to respond to the invitation and appear at the meeting with the Duke in person. She realized that such a step required not only courage, but also cunning, because she had to convince the Duke in the seriousness and legitimacy of her intentions. In her reply, she carefully hinted that she would be happy to discuss the proposal in person, thus giving herself 4 days to prepare and develop a convincing plan of action. Therefore, realizing the criticality of the moment, Adette decided to make a bold decision: to respond to the invitation and appear at the meeting with the Duke in person. She realized that such a step required not only courage, but also cunning, because she had to convince the Duke in the seriousness and legitimacy of her intentions. Morris persisted in trying to convince Adette of the dangers of her upcoming event. Adette, for her part, was not lagging behind in confidence and determination. She recounted her experience of going out dressed as a man, which went completely unnoticed. But Morris, whose uneasiness seemed only to increase, turned his attention again to an incomparably more important aspect of their scheme. He emphasized that the main threat comes not from ordinary citizens, but from the Duke himself, because he is not just a noble man, but also a knight with an unusually developed insight. Morris doubted that Adette would be able to mislead such a man as easily. Adette, however, saw no alternative to her plan. She objected, pointing out the impossibility of finding in such a short time, only 3 days, a suitable candidate for the role of Viscount Tarousaf. There was determination in her voice, but also an undercurrent of desperation, for time was against them. She turned to Morris to ask if he knew of anyone who might be suitable for the role, but the latter, with regret in his eyes, shook his head negatively. With those words, Morris sent Adette to the Duke, not forgetting to warn her that the Duke could pull out a sword if need be. The warning sounded almost like a curse, adding weight to the already tense atmosphere of their conversation. This moment was a test not only of Adette's courage, but also of her ability to analyze a situation with insight and foresee the possible consequences of her actions. In a realm where tradition and power had been polished for centuries, times of change had come, under the weight of which even the mightiest bore their burdens. The king, whose life had been long and full of trials, was now in a state where the years had levied their tribute, rendering him incapable of governing the state with his former vigor and determination. During this critical period, the rudder of the kingdom's administration actually passed into the hands of Crown Prince Gabriel, the king's eldest son, who assumed the burden of state affairs with dignity and seriousness. However, his younger brother Bishop, whose role and contribution to the fate of the nation was no less significant, also wrote himself into the history of the kingdom. With incomparable skill and strategic intelligence, he led the army, leading it to a brilliant victory that not only strengthened the military strength of the state, but also greatly enhanced its political status in the international arena. Bishop, with his extraordinary talent as a military leader, earned respect and recognition by solidifying his position in the hierarchy of power, but while both princes contributed to the prosperity of the kingdom, there was another hero whose role in achieving victory proved crucial. Duke Cade Metellio of Banjalirsker, a warrior of indomitable will and chivalric prowess, was the one who had the greatest influence on the outcome of the battle. His courage and strategic genius earned him the fame of a hero, in whose honor songs were sung, and the stories of his exploits inspired the population to new achievements. It was to this eminent duke, Cade Metellio, that Adette decided to turn. Adette, treading the path that led her to the duke's door, carried in her heart not only her own aspirations and dreams, but also the heavy burden of responsibility for the future she sought to change for the better. When Duke Banjalirsker Cade Metellio first stared at Adette, his gaze was full of incredulity and skepticism. There was a distinct surprise in his voice as he openly expressed his bewilderment at the Tarousaf family, a name he was completely unfamiliar with. Adette, trying to remain calm and confident, replied that her clan was on the edge of a financial abyss, and the last funds for investment were from her cousin's husband who unfortunately passed away. This answer provoked a further question from the Duke, who, with increasing interest, determined to learn more about the mysterious sister of Viscount Tarousaf. Adette felt the tension in the air become almost palpable. Her every word could be a clue to her disguise, her every answer could accidentally reveal her true nature to the Duke's discerning gaze. Gathering her will in her fist and taking a deep breath to gather her thoughts, Adette called out her sister's name, Viscountess Bears. What was her amazement when it turned out that the Duke had not only heard of the Viscountess's family, but was also acquainted with her, which instantly added tension to the already charged atmosphere of the meeting. Adette felt every cell in her body tense up in anticipation of further developments. In one of those moments when fate seems overflowing with unexpected twists and turns, the Duke unexpectedly expressed his admiration for the beauty of Viscountess Bears's daughters, claiming that each was a true beauty. He took particular note of his eldest daughter, recognizing her as not only outwardly attractive, but also as possessing a rare intelligence, though he admitted that she was, in his opinion, a little inferior in beauty to her younger sisters. Adette, realizing that the Duke knew of her true identity, felt a slight unease. She tried to change the topic of conversation, anxious to maintain her anonymity and not give any chance of revealing her disguise. However, to her surprise, the Duke, as if ignoring her attempts, expressed a desire to meet with Adette in the future. Adette, whose heart was burdened with heaviness by this unexpected turn, answered modestly. She emphasized that despite all of Adette's accomplishments and skills, Adette is just a woman whose highest goal in those days is a decent marriage. The Duke, to Adette's surprise, showed not only understanding, but genuine admiration for Adette's abilities. He noted that, despite the lack of male patronage in the Bear's family, Adette demonstrated extraordinary skill and wisdom in managing her family's finances. Such recognition was not only rare, but also testified to the Duke's deep respect for Adette's personal and professional qualities, which put her in a special position and set her apart from other ladies of her status. Adette, reflecting on her position in her family and society, felt somewhat eclipsed by her sisters, whose outward attractiveness was always the center of attention, leaving her less likely to be favored by those around her. She had assumed that the Duke would share the conventional wisdom and evaluate women primarily on their looks, but his reactions and views were unexpected to her. The Duke showed openness and even approval to the idea of a woman taking charge of the family, which was a pleasant discovery for Adette. Her surprise grew with every moment of their conversation, especially when it became apparent that the Duke saw her not only as a woman, but as a competent steward. The Duke's sudden questioning of Viscount Tarousaf's investment because of his niece Adette put her in an uneasy position. The moment was a test of her ability to maintain her disguise. Adette, not allowing herself to give away her true position, skillfully pointed out that the decision to make such an investment was her own, as if confirming her role as Viscount Tarousaf. By doing so, she not only kept her secret, but also showed independence and determination, which should certainly have brought additional respect to her person. In a world where the winds of change have already begun to raise waves of new possibilities, Adette suggested with a twinkle in her eye and confidence in her voice that it would not be long before the sea would be the stage for new and exciting voyages of discovery. She is convinced that the era of sea expeditions is just around the corner, which is why investing in the shipbuilding business, especially the one owned by the Duke, seems like a great idea to her. This business, she believes, promises to be a gold mine for those willing to take a risk and invest in the future of seafaring. However, with an unexpected twist, Adette added that if the matter did not involve the Duke's own business, she would hardly dare to take such a step. This statement aroused the Duke's surprise, for shipbuilding is an art that requires not only considerable financial investment, but also special knowledge, skill, and intrepidity in the face of maritime challenges. It was these words from Adette that underscored her deep respect for Duke's skill and daring that makes his business worth investing in. The Duke, hearing this answer, could not conceal his admiration. His surprise was quickly replaced by awe at Adette's insight and sincerity. She was able to see not only the potential in sea travel per se, but also the special value in the Duke's participation in the venture. When Adette saw the Duke for the first time, a wave of realization swept through her mind, confirming all those tales of his striking appearance that until now had seemed nothing more than sweet legends. His presence was shrouded in an aura of not only nobility and power, but also an unfathomable beauty that could make one forget all the cares of the world in an instant. Adette, consumed with curiosity and a desire to further understand the motives of this majestic man, dared to ask the question that had long been hovering in her thoughts. The Duke, accepting her inquiry with dignity, stated that he had the right to silence and not the fact that he would answer anything, as a reminder that not all secrets can be revealed. However, his openness to dialogue and willingness to share his vision, despite the possibility of evasion, only emphasized his extraordinary character. When Adette voiced her question as to why he, the Duke, needed investors, he, shortening the distance between them, revealed to her the essence of his aspirations. His business, as it turned out, was not just a commercial enterprise, but a government project which added to the importance and magnitude of his affairs. Adette realized that the Duke's shipbuilding business carried the potential to become a powerful weapon that could cause even the royal family to worry. Realizing that if the Duke took over the full management and funding of the project, his power and influence would reach such heights that it would inevitably lead to strict scrutiny and perhaps even restrictions from the kingdom. This thought shed light on the Duke's wisdom in his desire to share responsibility and power, thus minimizing risk and suspicion. Adet realized the depth of his strategic thinking, which allowed him to stay one step ahead and at the same time ensure his enterprise prospered without causing unnecessary tension with the royal house. In the course of their conversation, the Duke, whose attention to Adet only increased with every minute of their interaction, expressed a desire to see her again. He suggested hunting together as a symbol of trust and mutual interest, which in those days was considered not only fun, but also a way to strengthen alliances and friendships. After their meeting was over, they went to dinner, where Adet encountered a surprise. A steak lay before her, the size of which caused her bewilderment. This moment was not just a demonstration of the Duke's generosity, but a reminder of the world she found herself in, a world where abundance and splendor were commonplace to its inhabitants. The past day spent in the Duke's company had left an indelible mark on Adet's heart. She decided that the masquerade she was putting on while wearing Viscount Tarusaf's disguise no longer made sense, and decided she would never wear it again. However, when the invitation to the hunt did arrive, Adet realized that it would be a test not only of her personal feelings and decisions, but also an opportunity to prove her commitment to her new path. Accepting the invitation was a symbol of her willingness to face the new challenges and opportunities that would come her way on this unusual and unpredictable path. The Duke, possessing extraordinary insight, noticed a detail invisible to the eye of the ordinary observer. Adet seemed distracted and out of place on this hunt. With the unexpected directness and ease that only true aristocrats can possess, the Duke expressed his desire to plunge into the world of her memories, to visit her homeland. Adet, caught off guard by this turn and feeling thrilled at the sudden attention to her humble person, saw genuine interest and naive curiosity in his eyes. She was stunned by that look of pure-hearted insistence and, giving in to the moment, suggested he visit her home by the sea, which ironically was only a figment of her imagination. The Duke gratefully and readily accepted this invitation as if his neon had just begged for it. He acted as if he hadn't just been overcome by the impulse to get something so personal from Adet. But suddenly, the atmosphere changed. The Duke, as if the personification of caution and determination, drew Adet closer to him, creating a barrier between them from the rest of the world. His order to be quiet sounded not just like a harsh command, but a need to guard the moment they shared. He noticed a group of birds ready to become prey in their hunt. This moment, filled with tension and anticipation, was a test of their understanding and trust. With the silence broken only by the brief echo of a shot, the Duke demonstrated his skill as a hunter by aiming his rifle with ease and accuracy and firing a bullet. Adet, standing nearby, watched him, her eyes reflecting deep admiration for his skill. The Duke himself, feeling the satisfaction of a successful shot, allowed himself a moment of pride while the rest of the nobles gathered around, eager to see the results of his efforts. In this atmosphere of general attention and approval, Adet felt a little embarrassed and turned away, surprised by the Duke's sudden burst of laughter, which diffused the tense atmosphere. Later, as the day sloped toward sunset, coloring the sky with warm hues, they went for a horseback ride. Riding the horses, the Duke did not miss the opportunity to express his admiration for the skills of Adet, who seemed to be as adept at handling a horse as he was himself. Her skill was a surprise to him, and he noted it with pleasure as he pondered her every movement and grace. Seeing her smile, genuine and glowing with the joy of the moment, the Duke felt his heart fill with warmth, and he could not hide his admiration. This moment spent together was a true reflection of not only their riding skills, but also the casual intimacy that developed between them during that day. In the course of their leisurely walk on the soft waves of green grass, the Duke, looking attentively at Adet, suddenly broached the subject of her possessions, which, as he remembered, were situated along the picturesque seashores. He suggested that Adet no doubt had a deep knowledge of the sea, its mysteries and beauty. However, Adet, with a slight smile, shared her thoughts that the sea is a creature of inscrutability and mystery, and the more you learn about it, the more you realize how vast the abyss of the unknown is before you. She emphasized that with each day she spent near the sea, she became more and more convinced of her ignorance of its true nature. The Duke, admiring her modesty and depth of thought, recognized that, in spite of her words, she certainly knew the sea far better than himself. This moment made Adette think of her past reincarnation, in which she was a diver exploring the mysteries of the underwater world, and these memories added a note of melancholy and nostalgia to her voice. The change in the topic of conversation came unexpectedly when the Duke switched to a discussion of investments, noting that Adette's contributions to his business were unusually large. He emphasized that Adette's contributions to his case were perhaps above and beyond the usual measures, noting that ideally the total investment would have been distributed to more participants. This statement made Adette wonder if it was possible that the Duke was still searching for an answer to the origin of her finances in an attempt to unravel the mystery of her fortune. However, the Duke's next words had a completely different effect on Adette, stunning her. He openly admitted that he had finalized a circle of investors, and that the reason for inviting Adette into that circle was not financial considerations, but his personal desire to be around her, his desire for the companionship and fun she gives him. This confession added a new dimension to their relationship, revealing that behind the business collaboration was a desire for intimacy and friendship. Herzog thus expressed his sincere respect and affection for Adette beyond a professional partnership, and emphasized that his motivation to involve her in the business was not so much because of her financial contribution as because of the personal qualities he valued in her. The moment the Duke's words dissipated into the air, leaving behind a sense of uncertainty, Adette could already feel the frustration filling the space between them. The reflection of her embarrassment and resentment in the Duke's eyes confirmed his realization that the truth should have been revealed much earlier. His attempt at justification failed to comfort Adette, who, feeling the bitterness of the betrayal, decided that her presence at the hunt was no longer worthwhile. The moment she grew distant, her name resounded in the desperate cries of the Duke, who hoped for a resumption of their meetings in the future. But his words sounded hollow to Adette, for her irritation and anger were directed at the Duke's flippant attitude toward her investment, and how his interest was merely superficial curiosity rather than a sincere desire for cooperation or friendship. Her determination not to cross paths with the Duke again seemed unshakable. But despite the seeming finality of her decision, fate had other plans. To her surprise, shortly after the incident, Adette received a new invitation that made her heart race with indecision and anticipation. Adette, clutching two invitations in her hands, felt anger and frustration fill her mind. One invitation mentioned her by her real name, the other by the pseudonym she had used before it. Torn between the desire to find out the reason for such a double invitation and the desire to finally sever all ties with the Duke, Adette realized that she faced a difficult choice. On the one hand, it could have been a mistake or a misunderstanding that could still be corrected because the Duke himself wrote that he wanted to bring up the subject of investments again. On the other hand, such an act could indicate a deep misunderstanding and underestimation on the part of the Duke, which would make any attempt to restore relations pointless. In this moment of anger and confusion, Adette realized that she needed to find out the Duke's motives before making a decision. Perhaps it would give her a chance to see if she should give the Duke a second chance and a chance to atone for her mistake, or if it would be better to finally distance herself from him, preserving her dignity and independence. At one of those moments, as the sun was already sloping toward sunset, covering the garden in a golden glow, the Duke offered his hand to Adette to help her up from the cool ground. With warm interest in his eyes, he questioned her about the reasons why she had chosen to spend her time in the secluded garden instead of waiting in the spacious and cozy rooms of the mansion. Adette admitted with some embarrassment that she was overcome with boredom from the endless waiting for the opportunity to set foot outside the threshold of the very mansion that seemed to be full of secrets and mysteries. As she spoke, Adette couldn't escape the thought that the Duke might be thinking about something else entirely. Could he assume that her reason for being in the garden was to arrange a secret rendezvous? The thought made her feel even more awkward. The color flooded her cheeks at the mere thought of such a development. After all, Adette didn't really have someone she could arrange a date with, much less a secret one. In this beautiful garden, where every petal and every ray of sunshine seemed part of some great and mysterious story, she found herself alone, immersed in her own thoughts and feelings, which came to life under the Duke's gaze, filled with curiosity and perhaps misunderstanding. During their unexpected and somewhat cryptic conversation in the garden, the Duke suddenly moved on to an entirely different topic. He opened up to Adette, stating that his purpose here was to search for a certain man with blonde hair. But Adette had doubts about the truth of the Duke's words, for she had never seen such a man. She began to think that the mention of the blonde man might have been just a convenient excuse or alibi for the Duke to avoid any gossip or scandal, in case he was seen in the company of a girl in such a secluded place. After this statement, the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words and unspoken suspicions. The Duke seemed to sense the awkwardness of the moment, or perhaps his attention was diverted by more pressing concerns. He tossed over his shoulder that they would meet at the upcoming ball. That evening, when Adette stepped across the threshold of the magnificent hall where the ball was held, her ears were immediately filled with the whispers and admiring exclamations of the invitees. Everywhere there was talk of how extraordinarily beautifully the event was arranged, and many rushed to credit it to Daisy, the Duke's godmother, whose efforts seemed to revitalize the very embodiment of splendor and refinement. Daisy weaved her words through the guests as if she were a magician, convincingly demonstrating her care to make sure everyone in attendance felt a part of the magic by being at the epicenter of the celebration. While the guests continued to exchange speculation and admiration, special attention was paid to the Duke, his personality, his manners, and most importantly, with whom he would choose to share the dance. This moment enveloped the atmosphere with a peculiar anticipation, for the Duke's choice could mean many things, becoming an event that would be talked about for a long time to come. Despite her general interest and admiration, however, Adette was consumed with entirely different thoughts. There was no room in her heart for admiration for the Duke, who radiated arrogance with his whole appearance. As the sounds of merriment and music filled the air, Adette's heart sank at the unexpected sound of her own last name being heard among the many voices. The thought that her secret disguise as a man had been revealed sent a wave of panic through her. Fear gripped her for a moment, making her turn around to look for the source of the alarm. However, to her indescribable relief, all the drama of the moment dissipated as soon as she saw that the attention of those gathered was not on her, but on her sister, Viola. Adette's breathing became even as the realization that her masquerade had gone unrevealed brought her calm back. Now, rid of her personal anxiety, she was able to focus on what was happening around her. The crowd was already speculating and talking about Viola being the one the Duke would choose to dance with. This idea spread with such confidence that some even began to speculate whether the whole ball might have been arranged for Viola's sake, to emphasize her special position and possible favor from the Duke. Adette concluded that the Duke's sudden revival of interest in the subject of investments was due to none other than his attention to Viola. The thought flashed through her mind, confirmed by the whispers and glances that slid toward her sister. However, unexpectedly for Adette, the excitement around her suddenly shifted to herself, or rather her absence from the ball. Conversations and speculation began to spread among those present as to the reasons why Adette might have missed such a significant event, especially since the task of getting her married seemed to be a priority for her family. Adette's mother, who found herself in the spotlight for this speculation, tried to brush off the persistent questions. Her nervousness and desire to distract herself from the pressures of social expectations caused her to look around the room, perhaps looking for support or just a moment of respite. It was at that moment that her gaze, sliding through the crowd, came across the eyes of her own daughter, Adette, hidden behind her disguise. This sudden exchange of glances between mother and daughter was a moment of tension and yet understanding. At that moment, a scene filled with tension and unexpected twists and turns unfolded. Adette's mother, gathering her courage and apparently determined to confront her daughter's unusual choice, began to make her way resolutely through the dense crowd of guests. Her movements were quick and purposeful, each step showing the determination and excitement that gripped her at that moment. But Adette, sensing her mother's gaze and foreseeing the possible consequences, decided to avoid the collision and began to walk away, trying not to attract attention. But her heart was pounding in her chest with excitement and fear of being caught. It seemed that the pursuit would reach its climax, but suddenly, Fate intervened in the person of the Duke, who, unsuspecting, crossed the path of Adette's mother, interrupting her directed dash. His purpose was nothing less than to ask Viola for a dance, a suggestion that at that moment seemed especially meaningful and important. Thus began a dance that instantly attracted the attention of all present. It was filled with grace and elegance. The dancers' movements seemed to tell their own story, and Adette's mother, caught off guard by this beautiful moment, found herself unable to look away and walk away. She remained, chained to her seat, absorbed in the spectacle before her eyes. While her mother watched the dance, Adette seized the moment and left the hall, seeking refuge and a moment of peace. Her footsteps led her to the balcony, where she could finally breathe in peace, feeling the cool evening air on her face. Away from the hustle and bustle, Adette found instant relief in being alone with her thoughts and emotions that had been simmering inside her all night. In an unexpected moment, as the air was saturated with whispers and intrigue, words floating among the group of men reached Adette. The topic of their heated discussion concerned the attention the Duke was showing to Viola. These men, clearly unhappy that their chances of getting close to Viola were fading, did not hide their irritation. They saw the Duke's attention as a personal affront to their ambitions, for each of them had dreamed of winning the attention of this woman. Among the voices stood out one whose statement sounded like a verdict. He argued that Viola, being only the daughter of a viscount, had no chance of an alliance with the Duke. It was like a cold shower for the others, a confirmation of their worst fears of unequal odds in the battle for attention. Adette, standing in the shadows, recognized the man as Deepan Albans, and anger flared in her heart. She was seething with indignation, unwilling to accept such injustice in her sister's estimation. A decision crystallized in her mind. Deepan Albans would soon realize how deeply he had erred in neglecting Viola's value. Adette was convinced that her sister was worth far more than any titles and nobility of the Duke. Leaving her hiding place on the balcony, Adette found herself witnessing a mesmerizing sight. Her gaze fell on Viola and the Duke, who were dancing at that moment. They seemed detached from reality, completely immersed in the music and movement. This dance was their little world, where no one could disturb them, and where their feelings merged, feeling the resonance in each other. For Adette, it was confirmation that real feelings and sincere emotions were above any earthly confessions and class prejudices, but also a cause for concern. As soon as the dance, which seemed to stop time, was over, the Duke turned his attention to Adette. His gaze, full of interest and with a casual smile on his lips, was directed straight at her. With a fleeting but significant gesture, he made it clear that he wished to speak to her. Despite her displeasure and slight embarrassment, Adette couldn't ignore such attention. She stood, racked with a mixture of feelings, until a butler approached her with an important message. The Duke had expressed a desire to speak to her in person. It was an invitation that could not be refused, and Adette, though somewhat reluctantly, followed the butler. Daisy watched from the side, her eyes sparkling with curiosity and genuine interest in the developments. When Adette and the Duke were alone, she got to the point of the conversation without preamble. Her first question concerned the possibility of investment on the Duke's part, to which, after a short thought, he nodded in agreement. However, his condition was unexpected. The Duke expressed his desire that Adette sell him her villa by the sea, or at least give him the right to use it. Realizing that the Duke's ambitions not only concerned her personal space, but also his desire to develop his own business in the form of a shipping company in the same city where her villa was located, Adette could not hide a smile. This moment was a turning point in their dialogue, turning the initial tension into a sense of mutual understanding and shared interests. With ease and in the spirit of their newfound agreement, they clinked glasses, symbolizing the beginning of their collaboration. The highlight of the evening was when the Duke escorted Adette to her carriage to finally say goodbye to Viscount Tarousseff. With parting words, full of irony and a subtle hint of future meetings, he said, "I wish to see you in your dress next time, eldest daughter of Viscount Bierce." These words struck Adette to the core, for she had thought her disguise was flawless. The realization that the Duke had figured her out from the beginning was a shock and a surprise. Sitting in the departing carriage, Adette could not hold back her emotions. The loud cry of indignation that came from the carriage was a reflection of her inner turmoil. While the playful Duke, pleased with himself and the outcome of the evening, quietly headed back to the manor, Adette was immersed in thoughts about how this unexpected turn of events would affect their future relationship and what the future held for them. One not particularly distinguished day, the Duke discovered among the stubs of dusty letters one bearing the seal of Viscount Tarusaf. This message instantly aroused his curiosity, for the name of Tarusaf was only passingly familiar to him. Determined not to leave the matter to chance, the Duke launched a thorough investigation to find out details about the mysterious family in whose name the letter came. Soon, a motley picture of the stories woven around the house of Tarusaf came before him, but one discovery was so startling that it overshadowed all the others. Viscount Tarusaf, whose name was on the envelope, was in fact long since in his grave, which inevitably led to the conclusion that someone in the family had used his name. Among all the possible suspects, one person caught the Duke's attention, Adette Bears. According to the butler, when it came to the conduct of family affairs, the Viscount showed himself not at his best, while Adette was a striking contrast to her relative. She had not only amazing charisma, but also great managerial ability, which immediately intrigued the Duke. His interest in this woman became more and more intense, for in his eyes she appeared not merely as a participant in a family intrigue, but as a person of exceptional qualities and potential that could benefit his affairs or become a significant factor in future events. While the Duke was enjoying a moment of tranquility at the ball, surrounded by a festive atmosphere and joyous guests far away from these magnificent halls, Adette was experiencing a very different emotion. Her inner world was alarmed and seized with shock that her deepest secret, which she had so diligently concealed, was now revealed. With each step on the way home, her embarrassment only grew, and Morris, who had tried to support the girl, seemed to disappear to her, left unattended in this moment of her inner chaos. When she reached her hiding place, where only moonbeams penetrated through the ajar curtains, Adette threw herself on her bed, sinking into her world of reflection and doubt. Her heart beat at an unrhythmic and accelerated pace, reflecting the excitement she felt. In the back of her mind, Adette began to realize that perhaps the Duke had known she was a girl from the very beginning of their acquaintance. Perhaps he was deliberately allowing himself to appear ignorant of this fact, creating the illusion of ignorance so that, like a chess player, he could make moves in a game where she found herself an unwitting pawn. Gradually, going over in her mind all their meetings and conversations, Adette began to notice subtle hints and subtexts that had previously escaped her attention. Every exchange of glances, every smile of the Duke seemed to hold a deep understanding of who she really was. This realization made her heart clench with fear and excitement at the same time, realizing that their interaction was far more complex and multifaceted than it seemed at first glance. The confusion and uncertainty she felt was growing stronger by the minute, shrouding her thoughts in a fog of unresolved questions and worries about the future of their relationship. In the tranquility of the domestic morning, Adette's mother, not without warmth in her voice and a slight smile on her lips, addressed her daughter. She mentioned that during the night, her sleep had been interrupted by distant screams coming from Adette's room, but instead of concern or questions, her words were full of understanding and gratitude. With a lightness that is unique to a mother's heart, she expressed her admiration for the diligence with which Adette had worked for the welfare of their family. Her words were filled with deep gratitude that, thanks to Adette's efforts, they were all able to lead such luxurious lives, far removed from the many cares and hardships that characterized the lives of many of their social stratum. Adette, listening to these words, felt a wave of emotion that came over her unexpectedly and powerfully. The sudden recognition of her mother and her gratitude caused mixed feelings in the girl. Once the morning conversation at breakfast had settled down a bit, the mother shared the news with a knowing anticipation in her voice that brought excitement to the family atmosphere. She told her that Viola had had the honor of dancing with the Duke himself the previous evening at the ball. This revelation made Adette, who, despite her presence at the same ball, had not witnessed the event. Her mother continued, emphasizing that Viola had become the object of everyone's envious attention because the Duke chose to spend his time with her specifically, ignoring the other ladies. Adette, on the other hand, wondered if she didn't want to hear about what she had seen with her own eyes, but she couldn't say anything about it. Then Viola, as if unwilling to be left out of the general interest, shared that during the dance, the Duke had shown curiosity about Adette. This revelation made Adette freeze instantly, as if time had stopped around her. The unexpectedness of this fact and the sudden mention of her name in the conversation with the Duke caused mixed feelings in the girl. Viola hastened to add that the Duke was not merely inquiring about her in passing. His interest seemed genuine and based on a desire to know more about her affairs. This moment made everyone at the table wonder where the Duke's interest in Adette could have come from. Adette's answer to their unspoken question was brief and clear. Their paths had crossed due to a business investment, adding spice to the already mysterious interaction between her and the Duke. During that morning's interactions, an unpredictable turn in the conversation brought another intriguing detail that gave Adette mixed feelings of surprise and pride. The Duke, whose opinion was considered authoritative in the highest circles of society, expressed his admiration for Adette's ability in business, noting that she excelled most men in it. This recognition could not leave her and her family indifferent. Her mother, taking the Duke's words as a confirmation of her daughter's outstanding abilities, enthusiastically mentioned the upcoming events, which could now be looked forward to with renewed optimism. Adette, for her part, responded to her mother's words with a suggestion that symbolized their recent success. She advised her mother not to skimp on buying new dresses and all the necessities for the upcoming events. This generous gesture was made possible by a successful investment in the Duke's business, which not only increased their own wealth, but also opened up new horizons for the future. Her mother suddenly announced her decision. Adette was to be married this year. This decision sounded like a thunderbolt to the girl, for she had never thought of marriage before. But her mother was adamant, and without wasting any time, she and her sister set out to find the perfect wedding outfit. The dress selection process turned into a true family council, where each of the women in the family expressed their preferences and vision of what the wedding dress should be. Her mother and sister passionately discussed styles, fabrics, and jewelry, presenting Adette in a variety of looks. They insisted on a lavish and flamboyant outfit, which, in their opinion, should have emphasized the beauty and grace of the girl's figure. In their eyes, this dress was to be the realization of a dream of a fairy tale wedding where Adette would act as the main character. For Adette herself, however, the whole process was more about discomfort and rejection. At this time, Adette, deep in her heart, was wondering about her own future. All this talk of marriage and marriage made her remember one important thing. Adette's life was ruled by a mysterious and seemingly inexorable fate. With each new beginning, with each step towards the creation of a new family idol, her existence was cut short by a tragic and sudden end, forcing her soul to search again for a path to rebirth. In the first of her lives, she faced an unjust and cruel sentence. She was executed by guillotine on the very day she was to join her destiny with her chosen one. This act, full of despair and pain, sealed the beginning of her agonizing journey of rebirth. In her second life, fate once again disposed of her destiny with a cruelty that was hard to imagine. Her carriage, the symbol of her new life and hopes, was stopped on the road when she was sent to the east as a concubine. Then her life was cut short suddenly and mercilessly, leaving only a shadow of memories of unrealized happiness. The third life was marked by the outbreak of war, which erupted like a sudden storm at the very moment Adette was preparing to marry a man whose face she had not even had time to see. This frayed union, before it could begin, was interrupted by a whirlwind of events that took her life once more. And so, in her fourth life, when it seemed that happiness would finally smile upon her, fate struck again. On the threshold of her wedding, the car she was in was involved in a terrible accident. This accident was another cruel reminder of the cycle of her rebirths, in which every attempt to find love and happiness turned into a new tragedy. This was the path of Adette, a woman whose fate was held hostage to an endless cycle of rebirths and loss. With each new incarnation, she hoped to find peace and happiness, but each time she met only bitterness of separation and the end, forcing her soul to search again and again for a way out of this vicious circle. Surrounded by the darkness of nowhere, in between lives, the girl was once again searching for answers to questions that had plagued her soul for eternity. Her heart was filled with dreams of starting a family, of a sense of belonging and love that seemed so unattainable. Unable to understand why fate was treating her so unfairly, she struggled to find answers. And in one of those moments, as her soul hovered in the space between worlds, something happened that changed her perspective on her own existence. God appeared to her, materializing out of nothing, like a light at the end of a tunnel. His presence filled the space with calm and confidence. He spoke to her with ease and perfect clarity, his words full of compassion and understanding. He said that her troubles were not her fault, that she should not look for the causes of her misfortunes in her own actions or elections. The mystery he revealed next was as unexpected as it was enlightening. God explained that there was a special reason why she should not marry. It was not a mere precept or caprice of fate, but a deep-rooted rule of her existence, a thin thread linking her to the cosmos. Every attempt to start a family, every step toward marriage, inevitably led to her dying because her destiny was arranged to teach her something beyond the ordinary understanding of happiness and love. In a new chapter of her endless cycle of life and rebirth, Adette awakened to the world under the sign of an unusual omen. There was crying in the room, where the rays of the morning sun shone through the translucent curtains. Her mother looked at the newborn with bewilderment and grief, tears streaming down her cheeks like streams after a spring snowmelt. The maids, standing aside, exchanged surprised glances, unable to understand how such a thing could happen in a house where beauty and harmony always reigned. The mother could not accept the fact that her daughter, Adette, had come into this world with external features that many would call ugly. She mourned her daughter's fate, convinced that she would never be able to marry and find happiness in family life. To Adette, however, this fact sounded not like a curse, but an unexpected blessing. After her encounter with God and the realization that marriage was the path to her inevitable doom, she took her appearance as a protection, as a shield that would allow her to escape her mortal fate and perhaps live a long and happy life. Deep down, however, she still felt a longing for that unattainable dream of family and love that was so dear to her. Despite her acceptance and newfound understanding of her own destiny, Adette was unable to give up her aspirations entirely. She continued to attend balls and social events where young ladies and gentlemen of high society sought life partners. These events were filled with splendor and sophistication, and the air vibrated with expectation and hope. For Adette, it was a way to remain a part of the world she loved so much, despite realizing that her path was different from others. There was hope in her heart that perhaps there was another way to find happiness and fulfillment, even if the traditional path of marriage was closed to her. Thus, Adette's life became a paradoxical journey of searching for herself and her place in the world, where every step reminded her of the boundaries set by her unique destiny and at the same time opened up new horizons to explore. In the grand hall, illuminated by the light of hundreds of candles, a magnificent performance was unfolding, a ball at which all the nobility had gathered. Among the shimmering gowns and glittering uniforms, Mother Adette was engaged in a special mission. Her goal was clear and definite: to find a suitable groom for her daughter. However, Adette, who longed for freedom and love, did not want to submit to her mother's choice. With each proposed candidate, she felt more and more frustration and despair, wishing that fate would give her a chance to meet true love. When her mother looked away for a moment, Adette's heart filled with quiet hope. She believed that perhaps this moment would mark a turning point in their endless search, and her mother would finally relent and give up. As she pondered her future, Adette unconsciously shifted her gaze beyond the glittering crowd to the distant, glowing lights of the hall. And then suddenly her gaze stopped on the stage, which instantly captured all her attention. Her younger sister Viola, like the embodiment of a spring breeze, twirled in a dance, surrounded by admiring glances. The ease and grace of her movements caught everyone's attention, making her the star of the evening. Sister Adette was the center of attention, and many men mesmerized by her beauty and grace did not hide their desire at least once to become her dance partner. The group of men who had just been praising Viola's grace and beauty now turned their attention to Adette as well, but their words were far from admiration or even simple respect. They refused to dance with the ugly sister, as they put it, emphasizing the contrast between Viola, whom they compared to a shining diamond, and Adette, who was mercilessly dubbed a common pumpkin. Those words struck Adette with lightning, bringing her back to the grim reality she had tried so hard to escape with her dreams and hopes. She remembered the main reason for her reluctance to appear at the ball: fear of judgment, gossip, and unspoken but clearly felt appraisals. At the height of the evening, when Adette's emotions had reached a boiling point, fate had prepared her for a new twist. Her mother, a stately lady who commanded respect by her presence, entered the room with a friend. The men who had just ruthlessly criticized Adette were immediately transformed into models of politeness and courtesy. They bowed to Adette's mother with such reverence that it seemed as if the conversation that had just taken place had been nothing more than a bad dream. Adette, standing nearby, watched the scene with a mixture of amazement and indignation. How could the same people who had spoken so cruelly about her suddenly become placid in front of her mother? It was so unexpected that she could hardly contain her excitement. The moment of truth came when Adette's mother, as if sensing her daughter's awkwardness, casually pointed at her, drawing the attention of her interlocutors. Men who had previously not noticed Adette or pretended not to, suddenly found themselves in a predicament, coming face to face with the object of their recent gossip. Their surprise and confusion were so palpable that tension hung in the air. Adette, despite her inner turmoil and resentment, found the strength to behave with dignity. Hardly suppressing her disappointment in these people, she gathered her will into a fist and greeted them. Amidst the excitement of the evening, when every look and every word seemed weightier than ever, Adette's mother elevated her daughter before the entire gathering, proclaiming her the pride of their home. These words sounded not just like a compliment, but like a powerful statement of Adette's status and importance in the family hierarchy. Following this, her mother's friend, a woman whose opinion obviously carried a lot of weight in society, ordered her son, Isaac, to ask Adette to dance. This decision was met with laughter from his friends, which only added to the poignancy of the situation, making the air even more saturated with anticipation. Adette, caught in the epicenter of attention, felt a wave of embarrassment. The suggestion to dance with someone who moments ago had shared derogatory remarks about her sounded like a mockery of her feelings. However, despite her inner discomfort, she remained in full view, as if a symbol of resilience and dignity that defies circumstance. Isaac, who was in the center of this uncomfortable scene, approached Adette to fulfill his mother's wish. His action, though seemingly formal, carried the weight of a decision made under someone else's pressure. But before he could utter the words of invitation, events took an unexpected turn. At this unforgettable moment, when the hall was already imbued with an atmosphere of expectation and tension, the Duke's voice, filled with confidence and nobility, suddenly sounded. His invitation to dance, addressed to Adette, was like a whirlwind, instantly changing the vector of the evening. The confusion that Adette felt was instantly replaced by embarrassment at the unexpected turn, while her mother, not hiding her satisfaction, hurried her daughter along, reminding her of decency and the need to accept such high regard. As she held out her hand to the Duke, Adette forgot about everything for a moment. Their dance was the epitome of harmony and elegance, as if every step and movement had been preordained by fate. The music coming from the orchestra didn't just accompany them, it enhanced every moment of their interaction, making it truly magical. As they twirled in a dance, the gazes of the girls present filled with envy for Adette, who had been honored with such high regard. Among them was Daisy, whose face reflected sincere interest in what was happening. Her gaze on her nephew, the Duke, was full of surprise and perhaps pride at the unexpected choice he had made in choosing Adette over all the others. This dance was not only the culmination of the evening, but also a moment that will forever remain in the memory of all present, symbolizing the unexpected turns of fate and reminding that the true beauty and value of a person is often hidden from view and revealed only in the most unexpected moments. The Duke, whose attention was riveted on the grace and dexterity with which Adette mastered the art of dancing, did not hold back and expressed his admiration for her skills. But Adette, meeting his gaze, did not hide her displeasure. A flame of indignation flashed in her eyes. Winding up, she noted ironically that the Duke should have opened up to her earlier, admitted that he knew her closely guarded secret. The Duke, however, only laughed joyfully in response, his laughter sounding light and easy amidst the sounds of music and the quiet conversations of those present. The next moment, with tenderness and yet boldness, he pressed Adette against him and, as he continued the dance, lifted her slightly into the air. With that, he emphasized his surprise and admiration at how ingeniously Adette had chosen to come to him by taking on the guise of a man, a move that had clearly confused and delighted him at the same time. Such a reminder greatly embarrassed Adette that she still couldn't get past the situation. As their dance came to a close and the last notes floated away into the air, a loud explosion of applause erupted around them. The enthusiastic crowd gathered at the ball could not contain their admiration for this duo, whose unusual chemistry and dancing skills won everyone over without exception. The cheering and admiration of the audience filled the hall, reflecting the overall mood of the evening, an admiration for beauty and art that enlivened the magnificent halls and turned an ordinary evening into real magic. Adette, maintaining her dignity even at such a moment, emphasized to the Duke that she had no other choice. Her decision to adopt an unusual tactic and come to him in the guise of a man was dictated not by caprice, but by strict necessity. The Duke had previously refused to invest in her, which Adette believed was due to gender bias. After all, being a woman and pursuing business in their world meant facing invisible walls of resistance and misunderstanding. However, the Duke set the record straight, explaining that his decision was not due to Adette's gender, but to her family's activities. In his eyes, as a knight who had dedicated his life to defending his country and fighting on the battlefield, the simple business of buying and selling land, as the Bears family did, seemed something unworthy and frivolous. At the moment when Adette and the Duke first met, the Duke, following his convictions, tried to humiliate her and make her retreat, thinking that in this way he would close the question of investment and keep his principles from compromise. But Adette did not relent. Her steadfastness, courage, and fortitude in the face of contempt and attempts at humiliation amazed the Duke. She not only maintained her dignity, but also demonstrated a remarkable fortitude that he, despite all his prejudices, could not help but respect. As time passed, the more the Duke interacted with Adette, the more he began to appreciate these moments. Despite his initial desire to push her away, he enjoyed spending time in her company. It was something completely new for the Duke, because he had not expected that business negotiations could be followed by such unusual and pleasant communication. Adette, with her indomitable will and vivid personality, was more than just a business partner or a casual acquaintance. It gave him a new perspective on a world where values and interests can overlap and enrich each other, even when coming from radically opposite positions. In this whirlwind of events, when emotions had not yet settled after their previous dance, the Duke, as if ignoring all conventions and rules, made an unexpected move. He offered Adette another dance, an act so unexpected that it caused a wave of surprise not only in Adette herself, but among everyone present. After all, according to tradition, a repeated dance in such a setting implied a special intimacy between partners, which was usually the prerogative of lovers only. The Duke's gesture could be interpreted as a sign of special attention, and perhaps even a hint of the depth of his feelings for Adette. Adette, though caught off guard by the offer, did not refuse. Her consent was received with amazement, not only by those around her, but also by herself. She understood the ambiguity and possible consequences of such a decision because, by accepting the Duke's invitation, she was confirming his special attitude towards her in front of everyone present. This dance was not just another dance number at the ball, but a symbol of something much bigger, perhaps the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship.